Hi, everyone. This is Vanessa, also known as the International Immigrant, and welcome to my podcast. This is a place where we discuss everything immigration related, from the desire to work in another country for a few years, to test the waters, to studying abroad in the hopes of opening up some opportunities, and of course, full immigration with a cargo container of furniture and a residence visa stamped in your passport. If this is your first time and you want to know who I am and why I started this podcast, please watch or listen to the first episode as they are both in audio and video format. Today, I am going to be chatting to a friend of mine that I met in Australia. We were introduced by another friend who thought that we would get along fabulously, and she was right, and we did. We had some shared experiences that I think bonded us as we were both immigrants and both women who had moved on their own at some point during our journeys. And an amazing friendship followed for many years. Today, we are going to discuss her immigration experiences. So please welcome Kim. It's so good to see you, my friend. Oh my God, it's been three years. Like, yeah, it's so good to see you. I know.
Cheers, it's good to see you. Good to see your face. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Oh my God, we've shared so much. It was awesome. So can you introduce yourself and just tell the listeners like where you're from or where you're living now and your current situation?
Gosh, okay, me. A little bit about me then. So I'm British, born in England, and I have lived in 3 countries to date, New Zealand, Australia, and I'm currently residing in Belgrade, Serbia. So
and the UK, 4.
Yeah. 4, yeah, so 4 you count England as well. Apologies, yeah. So yeah, I've had some very successful and some not so successful experiences with immigration and overseas living. So, and in different decades of my life, I have done it in my 20s, 30s and 40s. So yeah, it's been different and interesting, and done it alone and done it with a partner. So again, both of those are challenging in their own rights and come up with lots of, I don't know, the one thing I would say of all my learnings is patience. You have a lot of patience. It's taught me time and time again to be patient, to accept the challenges that are thrown at you with grace, and to try and work through them as humbly as you can without getting too irritated and too angry or upset. And there's been tears. There's definitely been tears along the way. So, but joy, complete joy too.
I agree with you. As you said earlier when we were chatting before the podcast, a roller coaster ride, and moving any form of immigration, whether it's full immigration or just work visa immigration, working, with a work visa, there's a lot of ups and downs and tears and joy. So you've mentioned that you were born in England, okay, in the UK. And then how long were you there? And how old were you when you went? Because New Zealand was your first country, right?
Correct. Okay. Yeah. So I pretty much grew up in England, educated, parents are still based there. My family's still in England. I first went, obviously being in Europe, did a lot of travel as a sort of late teenager, young adult in my 20s, living in London, used to pop across to Europe and do a lot of, sort of international holidays and stuff. But I was living in London, had a Kiwi partner who had been there for about 8 years.
For those who don't know, Kiwi partner is New Zealand, but yes,
sorry,
we know
that. I had a New Zealander partner. So we went to visit his family one Christmas, and then the following year, it was pretty much, I want to return home. So we embarked on a journey together to emigrate to New Zealand. So I was, I think, about 25, 26 at the time. And naively thought, yeah, this is a no-brainer, this is easy. How difficult can it be? the New Zealanders speak English, I speak English. It's, both developed countries. It wasn't like it was going to be a cultural shock, but it was a total culture shock to some degree. And even though I'd visited the country beforehand, so I knew I'd been and visited, actually when I got there, there were a lot of things that I had to confront. And one of them was the new situation of the cultural difference in the fact that the way you live and go about your life, yes, it's probably the same in each country around the world, but how you make friends and interact with people and how you get out there socially, how you find work, how you have to prove yourself, is I don't know, it can be quite overwhelming. And it's not just like going on a holiday. I can remember at one point, very early on in New Zealand, absolutely petrified of getting on a bus. And it's like, I'm a confident, independent young woman. And while I was in New Zealand, I was so out of my depth, not even, like the bus stops didn't even have a number or anything on them that actually indicated what route it was or where you were going. And, just simple information about trying to decipher kind of stuff like that was, I think, just the general culture shock.
Was that because you for me, I kind of had the same experience. But it was because in South Africa, the public transport is, you don't want to get onto public transport. Let me just say that. So I had never used public transport in this country. White, privileged South African. I had always had a car or a mommy or a daddy that could drive me somewhere before I could drive. So for me, it was because I backpacked through Europe when I was 20 and stuff like that, and had got on to public transport there. But this was very strange for me. Was that your reason, or was it a different reason?
No, because I come from the countryside in the UK. Public transport to get in from a village to the local town or city was what we had to do as teenagers. Okay. You got a bus, you got on a train. I had to do that to go to work and stuff. And living in London, use public transport. London, when I was living and working in London, whether it's the tubes or the buses or what have you. So no, yes, I am privileged. I have parents who had a car. I had a car at one point, but I think it was just more to do, I don't know, maybe I was homesick. There was a lot of things that just put me out of my comfort zone. And I can remember just, feeling that some of those simple things, like getting on a bus, actually became a real challenge. And I had a friend who came and visited me whilst, my first couple of months whilst I was there. And she actually did it with me. She actually was very understanding. Was like, come on, let's do this together. It can't be that hard. And yeah, once we've done it, damn it, it was, yes, we sort of sussed it out. I think it was just a fear of the unknown. Yeah. And I don't know, those kind of things. But it was definitely a challenging time for me. I enjoyed New Zealand, amazing people. And I would definitely recommend anybody go and see the country and live there if they can. The visa issues for me at the time, I didn't do the de facto. I ended up doing sort of a 1-year working holiday visa or whatever it was. So in the end, that meant I had to go and do temping work and stuff. So I, registered with Kelly Services and, eventually got some jobs doing sort of reception roles and stuff. So it wasn't my career role to begin with until I got into those marketing roles. But I think all of that unknown and the pressure of having to, I didn't go with a lot of money. I didn't have any savings when I made the decision to go. So the pressure, I think, on me when I got there to actually contribute to the rent and the food and the relationship by getting work. And it was hard. It's hard when you don't know people. And, great that you have recruitment agencies and things like that where you can go and register your name and walk in the door, and they can put you in roles if need be, and assist you in those kind of matters. But yeah, it was challenging, and I was quite surprised because, like I said, I was a confident mid-20-year-old, and it actually blew me away really how much I probably missed the familiar. Everything was unfamiliar. Everything was new to me. Everything was different. So it eventually led to the breakdown of the relationship I was in. We didn't last the year. I ended up on another immigration challenge, which was then, what do I do? You know, do I stay in New Zealand? Do I go back home? Do I go traveling? And I actually ended up getting a sponsorship, a work sponsorship with a company I'd been working through for a few months. And there was a period of time where I thought this is what I wanted, and I had to sit and wait for a few months whilst the visa was going through. And at the end of that 4-month period, when the visa actually arrived, I actually then had this big sort of awakening moment that was like, I don't actually want to be here. This is not the place for me. I'd fought and fought and fought for this visa to stay in New Zealand and to work and live there. But actually it dawned on me I was lonely, I was homesick, and it transpired I was actually depressed and ill. So going home at that point in time and going back to England to the love and the care of my parents was actually the best thing for me. But I don't ever look back at that and think that New Zealand was a failure or that I shouldn't have done it. To me, it was a big life lesson, and it was a big learning curve, and it was a big challenge, and it was great to put myself out there and to face all the things I had to face in the 18 months that I was in New Zealand. But it was also one of the best experiences of my life, you know, and I got to meet some amazing, generous, friendly people who really came to my rescue when I needed assistance and help, who put me up in their own home for a few nights, who made sure that I, you know, taken care of, or, you know, even rented me a room for a longer period. So, you know, there's some lovely, genuine, kind-hearted people that, and that's amazed me about wherever I've been in the world, you do find that there are these people that, even though you may be down and out and lonely and sick or ill, they actually are compassionate and actually will, out of the kindness of their heart and not expecting anything in return, actually come to your aid. So, yeah,
it's wonderful when that happens. It really is. It kind of just restores your faith in some respects in humanity. And then, I mean, I agree with you. And I've kind of had two sides of the coin. I've kind of had that side of the coin. And then I've also had the other side of the coin where you just think, oh my God, like humanity sucks because like you're at a point where you're alone. I mean, you've got friends or whatever, but all of a sudden you need the support and there's nobody, you can't find anybody to so there's both sides of it, but I'm so glad that that was your experience, because it just changes you. It just changes you. It changes your faith in.
And I was, you know, I don't look back in my late 20s as a happy time in my life, but I actually believe they gave me a huge education, and I had so many experiences that actually made me into the person I am today.
Okay, great. So you've expressed basically that you have no regrets from that time, and I am completely with you. I mean, in the difficult times in my life, I have no regrets, because when the times are difficult, in my experience, and I think yours is the same, you actually kind of grow the most, because when times are good, you've got nothing challenging you. You don't really need to grow. I mean, you know, things are good. Just go on your merry way and do your merry things. And then when you get a challenge, that's when you stop and go, hang on, I need to grow from this. So you've gone back to England now to go back to be with your family, realized you didn't want to be in New Zealand. So what I want to know is, how long were you in New Zealand total time? And you've said that you have no regrets about leaving at that time.
Yeah, I was there for about 1.5 years total. And it was sad leaving, don't get me wrong. I bawled my eyes out at the airport and pretty much sat on the plane all the way home. Well, there was 2 planes journeys, but, you know, crying my eyes out. And there was a gentleman, you know, young travel teenager sat in the seat next to me who was very understanding and, you know, compassionate, and just listened to my crying and shouted to get me, you know, company in Bangkok airport as I walked. Crying my eyes out in Bangkok airport. And I think that was more to do with the fact that I thought maybe I was a failure mentally, that I was putting pressure on myself, that I was a failure and I was going back and I'd look like a failure to everybody at home when I got back to the UK. but in hindsight, no, I wasn't a failure. And, you know, things don't, like I said, things don't always go to plan or have always gone to plan. But I learned so much about me, myself in a relationship, myself having to sort stuff out for myself, my willpower, you know, and my gut feeling, like that real drive that I thought I needed for that New Zealand pass to stay and live there. And then that huge sinking gut feeling that actually arrived when I got it, that was like, holy shit, this is not what I want. You know, this is not where I'm supposed to be.
Right.
So that really helped me sort of tune in a bit more, I think, to myself, even though I was definitely ill and sad and depressed at the same time. That was one thing that was, you know, I think I was also scared of the fact I'd left the UK, this young, confident young woman, and I was returning perhaps as a broken soul, you know, with a sickness. And what would my mum and my dad, you know, the people who loved me the most, what would they say and feel about what had happened to me and what was returning to them? You know, this broken young lady as opposed to this strong, confident person they put on a plane. But, you know, time moves on. I lived with them for a while, and, you know, their love and support was, you know, what got me back on my feet. So, you know, if we fast forward a period of time, you're probably going to ask me, well, what happened next and where did I go next? And,
That's
you know,
exactly where I'm going next.
Exactly. So
see, we're just like that, darling. I mean, just always be.
I know where you're gonna go. Yeah, no, you know, lived and worked in the UK for a while, single woman, and just got itchy feet, really. I was also very fortunate in the fact that I was, you know, made redundant at the very early stages of the global recession when that hit in 2008, but managed to get myself a job very quickly in another industry. So I moved sort of from automotive into pharmaceutical marketing. And even though a lot of my friends around me for the next year and a half or 2 years were losing their jobs, having to job share, you know, all in sorts of kind of financial strife and what have you, I was fortunate that I still had a full-time job and I was actually being paid well. I'd had to have slight demotion in moving into this role, but, you know, I was happy, I was in a job. But I just got itchy feet. I just realized that my life wasn't going anywhere. My job opportunities weren't going anywhere because of, you know, the way that the situation was in the UK with the recession. And there was just one weekend I had this sort of, I'd broken a sort of a bit of a barrier where I was like, I can't be doing this anymore. What am I going to do? And I just needed to mix things up. So I actually decided to go traveling. And more importantly, went traveling on my own. So as, you know, someone in their early 30s, I packed up and went, and I had really no plans other than the fact that I had a global ticket to take me westward around the globe following summer. And 5 nights booked at my first port of call, which happened to be in Canada, in sort of the Maritimes. So
My favorite place. Oh,
yeah,
love Canada. Yes.
It was. And it was the most amazing experience. Like, you know, I know you probably touched upon this with some of your other females in other episodes, but traveling alone as a female, yes, you have to be savvy. And I've always considered myself streetwise, and I'm very aware of my surroundings and what situations I may or may not put myself in. But you shouldn't be afraid as a young woman to go on your own, or go to the cinema on your own, or for that matter, sit in a restaurant on your own. Yes, it can feel lonely. Yes, it can be isolating. And when you're stood on, you know, the edge of a beautiful sunset or a view, or you've just come mountain and there's no one around to congratulate or enjoy the experience with, it can also feel a bit lonely, but at the same time, it's the most rewarding thing. You have the freedom to do what you want when you want. You can eat when you want, you know, you can travel where you want, you can stay for as long as you want. You haven't got to compromise to sort of go, well, I want to sit here for another 3 or 4 days, but my travel partner wants to be here for another, doesn't want to be here anymore, and they want to move on, and like you're torn. traveling alone is great in the fact that you just answer to your needs.
It's liberating. There's a liberating aspect to traveling on your own. And yes, I mean, there are two sides to every coin. And yes, absolutely having a trip, because I backpacked around Europe on my own when I was 20, and it was amazing. But at the same time, when something great happens, you don't have someone to share it with. So there are pros and cons to both. But yes, I mean, it's extremely liberating. And if you're poor, as I have been on multiple occasions before, you only have to feed one person.
Yeah, exactly. It could be, it could just be a street vendor,
Yeah.
dog or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be some big fancy posh meal, or, it could just be Wheat Bix and yogurt for the day in a row or the 16th day in a row, whatever it is, baked beans on toast.
Yeah.
Matter, you're the king of your destiny. And your life at that moment in time. So that was, like you said, it's liberating. It also, I don't know, I also did a lot of Western countries to begin with. I traveled through Canada, and then went down through the States and into the Cook Islands, and I actually went back to New Zealand to make my peace of the country, if nothing else. I thank you to all those generous hearts that had helped me out, almost, sort of 5 to 10 years beforehand. But it was when I actually had to go into Asia on my own that I actually started to actually freak out a bit, in the fact that I knew this was going to be the cultural shift. This was going to be the cultural shock. And I can remember the sights and sounds of Bangkok. I haven't been to Bangkok before. When I first arrived, they assault you in such a non-forgiving way. The noise, the hustle, the bustle, the people. It's just that first night in my hostel, I was a bit like, holy moly, what have I got myself into? What's happening in this continent? But it was actually one of the most rewarding continents to travel to. I got to do a lot of countries that were not so well traveled at that point in time. Myanmar and Laos being two of them. And even though you're traveling alone, sometimes you're not traveling alone. I had companions along the way. You bump into people who are potentially traveling the same routes, so you'll see somebody in one hostel in one city or whatever, and then you might find that they're in the next one along, or you meet up with them somewhere. So you actually do make a huge friendship network in the traveling community whilst you're out there and backpacking, and you swap notes, and you exchange ideas on don't stay there, stay here, or I went to this museum, it was not worth the money, I went there and I really enjoyed it. So you do, and you find that I was a slow traveler, as I'd call it. I'd linger in places, just wanted to get the experience of the culture and the people, and not just be stuck in with on the whole a lot of young Westerners with wealth. And there was no harm in speaking to all those people, but I wasn't there to necessarily speak with those people day to day. I also wanted to know the people and the culture that I was visiting and experiencing. But yes, that pretty much put me, not that Australia was on my travel plan at any point when I was traveling. I kept getting pulled into the country for various reasons, to go and see a friend, for example, who was living in Sydney, my cousin's wedding in Darwin, etc., etc. So it came to that point at the wedding when I was talking to my uncle, and he was like, well, I've been traveling for about a year and a half. And he was like, what's happening, Kim? What's going on? Are you going home at some point? Are you going to get a job? And it was that whole kind of society sort of pressures that I felt for the first time in a long time, as you've got a certain way that you have to conform with life, and one of those is having a 9-to-5 job. One of those is being sat still in a particular country, or whatever it is, or being in a relationship, or getting married and having kids, or what the norm accepts of you. And it took me a little while. Like, I spent some time, I think spent about 6 weeks in the end, sort of sat in the Northern Territory, which is a beautiful territory, I have to say, in Australia, contemplating my next step and what it meant. And eventually I decided that, well, I worked in IT and technology and the web and digital marketing. And I just thought, well, if I'm not careful, if this becomes 2 years out of work, does that then put me at a disadvantage if I return to work? Because technology moved on so much in the time. What have I out on? What, you know? So there was this little bit of fear factor again about, oh gosh, maybe I should go back and do work. And I was quite content. And for whatever reason, I was not ready to return to England. Just did not want to be there. Again, my gut, my calling was to be in the warmth, in the sunshine. I've been very fortunate to travel and follow summer around the globe. So I just naturally started to think about, okay, well, let's find work somewhere. And I naturally thought about all the English-speaking countries I'd been to, you know, whether that was Canada, America, New Zealand, or Australia, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just like, well, I'm in Australia. It's probably going to be, I knew the country. I've been there a few times previously. I was like, well, this is a better place as any to try. And that's when I embarked on the next stage, which was applying and trying to find a way to emigrate there. I actually ended up coming home to the UK for 5 months whilst I worked through a visa situation, which for me ended up being a work sponsorship on a skills shortages list.
Mm-hmm.
The Australian immigration process at that point in time, you know, had a marketing skill as a shortage in their country, and therefore they were willing to, you know, bring people in to fill that hole. And I managed to get an interview with 2 companies, which both offered me a job, of which one I accepted. And that was how I ended up in Australia. And I was there for 8 years. It was an amazing place. Love it. Places, you know, I couldn't go to the East Coast. I was definitely a West Coast person. I would, you know, wanted the peace and quiet maybe of Perth, the beauty of the beaches, the unspoilt nature, what nobody really knows about Australia. And it was a well-kept secret, I think, and it still probably is well-kept.
It still is. And it's amazing that you say that, because I obviously share that with you. You know, I was 10 years in Perth. We knew each other for quite a few of those years. And I'm so glad you said that, because, you know, everybody, a lot of my students, a lot of people that I speak to that want to emigrate, you know, Melbourne and Sydney, Melbourne and Sydney, Melbourne and Sydney, Melbourne and Sydney, and then maybe Brisbane might be thrown in somewhere, or the Gold Coast, but that's where everybody wants to go. And you are right, Perth is this beautiful, well-kept secret. And if you like to go out and party every night and get drunk, I mean, they have these few little areas, you know, where people do go. But if that's your life, and you want these amazing shows of Melbourne, or like this big city kind of feel, yeah, Perth's not for you. But I agree with you. It's a sort of it's absolutely exquisite, big river that runs through it on the West Coast ocean. I still think it's got some of the best weather in Australia, white sand beaches. It's just quite an isolated city. You know, if you're in Melbourne or Sydney, it doesn't take you long in cars to kind of go. You can go to Canberra or wherever. But I'm so glad you said that. I agree with you. I agree with you that Perth is this lovely little kept secret.
Let's have not too many of your listeners cotton onto it and ruin it.
Well, we've left, darling. It doesn't matter.
Well, I'm a permanent resident, so I'm still a resident of Australia. So my visa journey from the 457, you know, temporary residency opened up to me becoming a permanent resident and hopefully a citizen. I still want to return to Australia, so I'm on the, you know, the citizenship, dual citizenship journey, purely because I also have a home now in Australia. I purchased a home there.
Congratulations.
I found my partner there, you know, who is, you know, after many years of being, I pretty much spent my whole 30s as a single person. So, you know, after a decade of being single, you know, in my early 40s, you know, I found what definitely felt like the connection of my life in my partner at the moment. So, and he's an Australian. He's born and bred in WA. So, you know, he's probably, you know, it's probably going to be both our homes, you know, at some point again. But yes, we are not in Australia at the moment. So which
brings me to, where are you now?
Yeah. So yes, in the Balkans, in Eastern Europe, in Belgrade, Serbia. So we moved here last November, or actually last December, early December. We embarked on the move during the height of the COVID pandemic here. We arrived at the peak of the sort of unfortunate sort of breakout of cases just before Christmas, which we had the opportunity to maybe sit out in Australia for a bit longer and come when things had settled down. But it was almost like seize the moment. And to be truthful with you, I'd had itchy feet in Perth and Australia for a while. And purely because the isolation that you briefly touched upon, it is an isolating city. It's a long way to travel. And somebody who loves travel, it was a long way just to get away. You know, even if you're going into Indonesia, or even if you're going to the east coast of Australia, you know, Tokyo, Singapore, wherever it is, it's a long journey. Especially for someone like me coming from Europe, where
especially you coming from Europe, because I mean, for me, going 4 hours or 3 hours to Melbourne, or 4 hours to Bali in Indonesia is nothing. I mean, it when I lived in Australia, in New Zealand, and my partner and I had to travel back to South Africa, you know, I remember one trip taking almost 48 hours with stops in between planes, and there was a flight that they'd kind of taken off late, and so we kind of missed a connection. But yeah, I mean, for you from Europe, yeah, absolutely, the context is a long way. For me, it was like, hell no, like Thailand, Indonesia, short distance.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. For someone who's used to go to Germany for the weekend, to, you know, Paris for a weekend, or whatever it might be, yes, it was a bit of a. I love, like I said, I love Australia. It was just that I'm a wanderer. I'm a bit of a, I need change. And I've been asking the universe for a while, you know, and been putting it out there and sort of, not necessarily manifesting, but just sort of verbally saying that it was about time that I wanted to go traveling again. My partner at the time was all about settling down and buying a house. So I embarked upon that journey with him, and then just purely at the right moment, at the right time, we then got the opportunity to go traveling, to move, to relocate, to be somewhere else. And I can tell by the way that everything sort of went smoothly for us, in the fact that renting our house out, selling our cars, selling our belongings, et cetera, it all just fell into place miraculously, that it was like, this is meant to be. There's no obstacles. And I was expecting obstacles. I've had a lot of obstacles in my fight, visas and the migration progress from country to countries. I've never really gone smoothly for me. So the fact that the universe was rewarding us with, oh no, you can sell your car within hours, you can find a renter for in days, was like, wow, this is all these ifs and buts that my partner had about, oh, how do we do this? What do we do? Were actually solved for us, which was great. We're here on a work visa for my partner's job, which has meant that I currently don't have the rights to work in Serbia. So that's something that, you know, is become a challenge for me at the moment, that I'm sort of having to adjust to what that means for me, my career, who I am in the morning when I get out of bed, for what I do for the day. But we both love this country. We're both loving the experience of being here. We're extremely grateful that we've got the opportunity to be here whilst a lot of the world is in lockdown. A lot of the world are suffering, and you know, we have had, you know, the issues here with, you know, COVID restrictions and stuff. But on the whole, we try and embrace every opportunity we can to explore Serbia, you know, do a day trip at the weekend if we can, or go and see something. You know, we have to eat outdoors at the moment, there's no indoor eating, but, you know, if we can sit in a cafe on the street corner and have a coffee for half an hour, or go for a meal in the evening by the river, then yes, we're trying to embrace life and get on with it. And I will say it's been a challenge this time around moving with a partner, because a lot of compromise that goes with that. There's a lot of two people's expectations
Right.
that have the mixing pot. We were very fortunate that the legalities of our paperwork were assisted. We had given assistance via sort of Ernst Young through my partner's company. So a lot of that was taken care of, but we're in a de facto partnership. This country doesn't recognize de facto partnerships. So there was still a lot of challenges for us improving our relationship and getting the paperwork that was required for me to be here with him that still challenged us. And that's the one thing that is constant, I would say, in any migration journey, is the patience and the challenges that come up, and the way you deal with those, and get disheartened. And I think looking back on all my migration journeys, they don't always go smoothly. There's always something in the legalities of paperwork or whatever it is that you have to work through. And especially with, you know, the two previous journeys in New Zealand and Australia, they weren't quick processes. They didn't happen in weeks. They happened in months sometimes. And and in years, even in one case, in, you know, for permanent residence in Australia. I think sometimes the universe or the authorities or whatever it is are actually testing your patience to say, are you genuinely wanting to be here? Is this your dream, or is this just a whim? Because sometimes I think a lot of people who are on a whim give up maybe at the first hurdle or the second hurdle.
Right.
But I think those who are truly committed, who truly believe this is their next step, this is their next dream, will work through each of those challenges, each one of those hurdles, each one of those obstacles, and actually come out the other side. And then it's so much more rewarding, because you have got what you wanted. You've got your dream. You know, it's something that you have worked damn hard at to fight and to prove that this is where you want to be. And then you get the joy of life. You know, you get the joy of the simple pleasures of, like, even here, walking around here yesterday in the sunshine, it was like, how did this happen? This is amazing. I am in a new country. I'm experiencing new culture. You know, they don't speak English as a first language here, and my Serbian's pretty poor, but the universal language of sign language or patience or helping or trying to get along, you know, is helping us out. And it's just something that I'm grateful to be able to do. And hopefully, as time, you know, with the global pandemic, you know, becomes a bit more under control, you know, we'll get to explore some more of the Balkan countries around us, because never being in Eastern Europe before this point in time, I can say, yes, it's, you know, obviously we're in a developing country that wants to join Europe, but it's got a lot of charms. It's got a lot of initial, what's the word? I don't know, not necessarily ugliness, but you sort of have to scratch the surface a bit and not judge a book by cover, is how I've described Serbia. You know, it's from the outside, it might not look appealing, but actually, once you actually delve deeper, it's fascinating.
Right, right. And I just want to just quickly a little bit just go back to what you said about countries kind of testing you, how much do you want it? And in my mind, and I don't know how much you agree, I think it's kind of a combination of countries and the universe or God or whatever your belief system is, because yes, some countries will test you a lot more, and to the point where it's not even a challenge anymore. You kind of almost feel as if they're trying to deter you completely. And then potentially I kind of also look at it as divine, a little bit of divine challenge, like, how badly do you want this? This will work for you if it's for you. And in one of my episodes, I think I said, oh, I know I've said it to my students many times, you know, this English expression is that what is for you will never pass you by, but how much are you prepared to potentially sacrifice for it or work for it or show that you want it? You know, as we said, you know, in the good times, you're learning very little. And I'm very happy, to be honest, I am super happy for the people where it just goes beautifully smoothly. beautifully smoothly, and everything is just works out well, because I do think that's kind of destined, and maybe it's I don't know, some cosmic reward for something. I don't know. I'm still waiting to be rewarded, but but I mean, I do kind of feel that there's sort of an element of both that comes into play. And yes, it is a challenge. I mean, anything that you feel proud about is a challenge if you've had to work for it. But what I want to ask you now, because you're kind of the first guest that I can sort of ask this of, because, you know, my journey is quite unique in the respect that I've lived in 6 countries, okay, which is quite a few. And, you know, I've spoken to somebody who's living in Germany now, and I've spoken to friends who have lived and taught English in different countries, but yours and my experience is sort of a little bit more similar. You're now living in a country where English is not the native language. I did that with Costa Rica. We've both lived in New Zealand. We've both lived in Australia. I was raised and educated in South Africa on the British system. My father is from England originally. You were born and raised in England. And I've been asked this question so many times. It's probably one of the most popular questions I get asked is, what was your favorite country?
Holy moly.
I know, right?
Oh, it's hard because every country is so different. So different. I can't single out one, but I could probably give you a top 4 in the fact that
you've lived in 4.
No, and I will also count the countries I traveled through, in the fact that because I traveled for a long period of time and I did the slow travel, like I,
right.
Spent 2 or 3 months in each country or what have you. If we're going down to basics of living, I will probably say, my heart and my lifestyle in Australia my soul was happy.
Mm.
New Zealand is fantastically beautiful, especially the South Island. Stunningly, nature is pristine. Canada, I enjoyed my time in Canada. I think I was there about 3-4 months in the end in Canada. I traveled from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. That again, from a beauty point of view, the wilderness, the people, the hearts of people I came across. But then I can't leave out countries like Laos and Myanmar, which I traveled through Myanmar before it was an open country. So it was hard travel. It was the hardest travel I've had to do. But the souls and the people that I met in both Laos and Myanmar were genuine people. They were the poorest people I have seen in life, but they were the happiest souls I've ever seen. And, they invited me into what was essentially a wooden hut or grass hut on stilts, and, were showing me around their home and were proud of their home, but weren't ashamed of their home, knowing that I was, a Westerner, with probably more wealth than they could ever dream of. And just the sheer pleasure and joy that watching locals and their faces have such beautiful happiness and expressions on them. And you don't see that in places like Australia and New Zealand and Canada and America.
No, because I mean, those countries, and we're part of those countries in that journey now. I mean, there's a certain level of expectation, and coming from South Africa and going, I mean, had a very privileged life in South Africa. I was born and raised in an extreme amount of white privilege, but when I had my back surgery in Australia, and the Australians were complaining about the system, and it was all for free because, I was working there, I was on the Medicare system, and I was thinking, can you go to South Africa and have the same operation and then tell me how bad this system is? So it's all relative. They are lands of milk and honey. You cannot blame the people for having this sort of taken for granted view, because they don't know the other side of the coin. When you travel, you see the other side of the coin.
No, you do. And that's why I'm very grateful of my life experiences and those travel experiences. And I've always tried to take the route less traveled as well. I try to do, I don't do the commonality of, the major points of call. I try and break that and try and get to other areas where, maybe harder to get to, or other cities and towns to visit, and just go and see places that aren't a tourist hub as well, because that is when you actually see the authenticity of the everyday life and the country. But yeah, I don't know, and everybody's experience in the country is going to be different based on your own mental state at that point you visit, based on your expectations of when you visit.
Yeah.
Look,
I don't know if you feel the same way, but my kind of response has basically been, this is a difficult question because different countries were good for me at different times in my life. There were 2 countries that I lived in of the 6, and I've been open about this, that I had a very rough time in. I wasn't in a very good emotional, mental state, and because of that reason, they were not countries that I was happy in or that I would return to. And I just loved you saying that my soul is happy in Australia. I just love the fact that you used those words, because that's how I feel in Canada. Like, my soul is just like, I was working over 50-hour weeks, earning less than minimum wage to pay a first world rent and to buy first world groceries. And I was exhausted, but my soul was just happy. I would just walk in the morning and everything was beautiful because I was just happy. And I can live in a paradise and be absolutely miserable and just can't see the beauty around me. And I love the fact that you said that, because I feel the same way as you. It's just literally on the other side of the world and in the north while you're in the south, where I just kind of, my soul is happy.
No, definitely. But don't get me wrong, my soul is also really happy in England, in my roots, in the countryside, in, hearing the birds and watching the green, and the countryside come alive in spring is amazing in England. And even at the end of summer, I can definitely feel at some point I will probably return to England. It's not going to be a country that I've neglected or a home that I'm never going to return to. And it probably goes for granted when I think about the places I go to. I just automatically dismiss England as a place or the UK, because that is my home. I still call it home. I may be on the journey for citizenship in Australia, but I'm proud to be a Brit. I'm proud to be English. I'm proud to be associated with that country. I'm definitely never going to give up my English roots and my background. It is me, it's who I am. And I love the history of the fact that England, which Australia doesn't have, has a lot of history, has a lot of heritage to it and traditions, which, Australia is a very young country in comparison to that. So I think it's more the piece that I get from Australia is the beach life, the low sort of the sunlight. It's that's the kind of thing that really warms my heart.
Right.
I love the kookaburra call. I love the smell of the eucalyptus. So it's a sensual journey, I think, that for me is where my heart's the happiest.
I love that. I love that. And that is just the most perfect thing to end on. It really is. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for doing this. I mean, I just absolutely love you to death. You know this. We've had an amazing time together in friendship and ups and downs, and we share some similar views and thoughts and experiences. And I just want to thank you so much for doing this. I really do. I'm so happy that you're on here with me.
No, anytime. It's been good to chat to you again.
Anytime. Okay, listeners, you heard that, anytime, because I have some future, we want her back, and I've got some future ideas. So I somehow don't think this is going to be the last that you'll see of Kim. But thank you all for listening. If you want to see the video version of this podcast and you're listening to the audio version, please go to my YouTube channel, International Immigrant, and subscribe so that you get all the updates whenever I add a new video. For those of you that are listening, Kim's waving. Goodbye. Please also head over and follow me on Instagram, international__immigrant. And for those of you just listening to this podcast, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I know you can subscribe to my channel, so please do, and be notified when I release new episodes. Again, if you have any questions that you would like me to answer in future episodes or simply online, please feel free to ask in the comment section on any of my platforms. And from my international immigrant journey to yours, see you next time.